Hello everybody, welcome. I'm taking you through a journey, a very personal journey for me, into my family, my home and my kitchen. As a Hindu, my culture is very much centered around two very important things. One is God, as you will see our prayer place in a garden, and the second being food. And with the two together, we normally merge the two together, but in this case I'm cooking a mutton curry, so clearly it's not going to be because our gods are vegetarian. I will now take you through and we'll go into my home and we will now go and I'll show you my place that I find peace, tranquility, and a place where I de-stress at the most stressful times in my life. Oh, by the way, let me just tell you about my apron. This is one of my prides and joys. And let me tell you why. If you look here, you will see it says the Michelangelo Hotel. That's the beautiful hotel in Santon. And it says the chef's table. I spent one magical evening at the chef's table in the Michelangelo. So in that fancy kitchen with its different pastry section, different hot food section, I sat at a table there while the chefs were working around me and enjoyed a 12-course meal. It sounds a lot, but I promise you it's little bits of food. But what an experience. And as a memento of that day, I was given one of these aprons which says chef's table. I tell everybody, but I actually tell them I cooked there instead of eating there. Let's go in. Welcome to my kitchen. This is probably my favorite room in the house. As I said earlier, I love being in the kitchen, cooking. It helps me de-stress. Critical to my kitchen is my pantry, which is on this side, and which generally tends to be well stocked. You can see it's well stocked. And everything I need is generally in there for me to prepare my food. Now, Indian food or Indian culture is so involved. To begin with the pot. Pot is important. Because firstly, when a woman gets married, the bride's family would give her sets of pots. And within these pots, they would put food or they'd put sweet stuff so that their pots never run empty throughout her marriage. At the same time, generally the bride's mother would be the one involved in buying, and it's got to be AMC pots. This is what the mother would buy for them. And generally, the success of the wedding is measured by the number of sets of pots on stage. Don't ask me why. So, I have one of those pots here. As you can see, it's a fairly new pot as well. This pot has a story behind it. My mother-in-law gave me this pot as a birthday present once. And if I had to tell you, this pot costs almost 6,500 rand. So it's a fairly expensive piece of equipment, but clearly she recognized my culinary skills. Okay, so we're going to start with the ingredients. You start a curry with a base, which is oil, onions, and then you get your whole spices. Your whole spices that I have here are star anise and cinnamon, and for my personal favorite, it's a bit of green chilies, not always put into the food. Then you get your masala. Now masala has a story of its own in Indian culture. For example, if I had to tell you about masala, in the old days as a child I remember, we used to make the masala at home. We used to grow the chilies at home and we'd crush it and we'd crush all the whole spices, roast it and put it into the masala. As my wife often says, a good masala means you don't have to add all the extra spices into your food because it's all mixed into this. Nowadays, we are fairly modern. So what we tend to do is, and I'll be honest, I didn't make the masala myself. I use masala from a company called Nagyas, which is a local butcher. And you see, it says there, Durban style. So basically, the masala I'm using now is a commercially produced masala that has quite a nice taste to it. The thing is that in the old days, depends on whose house you went to, you'd get a different curry, a different taste to the curry. But generally now people buy masala, so it's much easier. Okay, in the masala itself, you'll find these little leaves, right? It's not Durban poison, I promise you. It's curry leaf, and we use curry leaf in our food. Gives it a beautiful flavor, and at the same time, an intriguing aroma in the kitchen when you cook with it. Very fresh, very crisp flavor. I've added, just for my own sake, a bit of turmeric powder to my masala. It just gives a little bit more depth of color, so it's not as red as other curries are. You might be wondering about the spoon. It looks like a real war-beaten spoon. This spoon actually has a history. Comes from my mother-in-law's kitchen. So I guess as my wife was growing up, this would have been one of the spoons used either to cook the food or beat her over the backside. But anyway, so this spoon comes from there. I like it because it's a nice strong spoon. My wife's got lots of these new stainless steel stuff I don't really like because you can't stir curry properly with it. So that's the masala. This is known as, in the lingo, G&G paste, ginger and garlic, crushed ginger and garlic. Now, the trick to a good curry, not to buy commercial ginger and garlic, the crushed one that you find in the buckets. What you need to do, that is raw ginger and that is fresh garlic, is to peel it, crush it and use it directly in your food. Imparts much good, better flavor to the food. I'm making a lamb curry, so clearly lamb, cut, cleaned, washed and ready for the pot. Important to have fresh ingredients. Indian cooking is all about freshness. It's all about that rich flavor that comes out of the food. So if you look at this, it's been washed and cut and cleaned, and lamb, so you know it's going to be a little bit on the fatty side, which means it shapes what the amount of oil you put into the food. Freshly diced tomatoes. Again, not from a can. No cans, no tomato paste, straightforward diced tomato. And then of course I must have potato. I'm not Indian if I don't eat potato. Okay? So now we're going to start cooking this food. We're going to start preparing it. So clearly the first thing I need to do is switch the stove on. I love gas. Gas is instant heat and it's much more controllable than electrical stoves. So now we've got the stove on, the pot is on the stove. The next thing is I put the oil in. As you can see, it's about, probably I'd say about 2/3 of a cup of oil. Remember, lamb is fatty. You don't want to put too much of oil in, because if you do, you're going to end up with a very, very oily curry. And I don't think anybody wants to have that. Allow the oil to heat a little bit. We allow the oil to heat. Then I put in my onions. Now, I allow the onions to saute. Lovely word, that saute. Comes from the French. Most people will tell you sweat the onions. I don't like that word. It sounds too agricultural. But anyway, onions go into the pot and you allow it to saute. So when it gets to a translucent stage, we will add whole spices into it. So we will wait for that to happen. There's lots of words in cooking, in general cooking, that come from the French. But I'm always reminded of a beautiful story about the French from the movie The 100-Yard Journey, where this Indian chef in his absolute frustration turns around and says to a Michelin-starred chef, the problem with the French is that when they like something, they use mingy amounts in their food. But when Indians like something, we just put a whole lot in. So we like chilies. I guess I'm going to put a lot of chilies in here. So we're going to wait for this to heat up and saute. I must tell you, cooking is therapeutic. When you take raw ingredients and you create a meal and you watch people that you love enjoying that food, enjoying the food that you cook and you prepare with love, it really makes a big difference. And it's central to everything we do, because in Indian culture generally, if a person comes to your home, whether they're invited or not, you should feed them. And that's why you find the normal refrain is, why don't you eat and then go? So you know that once you eat, you gotta go. You can't stay any longer. So we're now waiting for this to heat up. But while that's heating up, let me tell you another story. I'm always full of stories. I tell my kids these stories often about the war that I was in. I never was in a war, too young for that. But my wife and I got married. We were newlyweds. And my wife used to make the most lovely chicken curry. And one day I decided to make her chicken and peas curry. And unfortunately I forgot to put salt in. If you know anything about peas, you know it makes the food extremely sweet. So if there's less salt, the food's quite horrible. And yes, that was my start to my cooking life with my wife. We've been through many journeys through the years, but yeah, that's how it started. So now I'm putting in the green chilies, the cinnamon, star anise, and we're going to let that roast for a while. You probably can hear that. Yeah? That's a curry starting. We'll try and take a look at inside the pot. There's a beautiful flavor of the onions, the star anise and the chili. Lovely, lovely aroma. That's the promise of a good curry there. Clearly my mother-in-law got much of my culinary skills to invest in this as a gift. Quite an unusual gift to give your son-in-law, I guess. The thing about Indian cooking, making a good curry, I see lots of recipes, but I can tell you it is so difficult to actually have a recipe for a curry. Because very often you cook by feel, by the smell, sometimes the taste. We don't really, culturally we don't taste our food all the time when we're cooking. We don't consider that hygienic for whatever reason, but yes we don't. So you guess as you go along, but you do it by feel. And it's actually quite an interesting exercise. So when people write up recipes, I often wonder. And then when you go to these beautiful Indian restaurants, or so-called Indian restaurants, and the waiter would ask you, do you want your food mild, hot, or medium? And that's the point at which I know I'm not going to have an authentic Indian experience. The reason? You prepare an Indian curry from its base with a certain flavor, with a certain taste. And if you now have to make it hotter, what do? You add a bit of masala from the top, which hasn't really roasted through and imbued the meat with flavor. Likewise, if you want to make it slightly milder, you'd be adding fresh cream or something like that to the food, which actually destroys some of the richness of the flavor that exists in it. So our onions are almost there. Yeah, I'm almost there, but I wish you could smell this. That cinnamon. Beautiful, beautiful smell. Okay, if you keep watching, it's not going to cook any faster, so I'll stop watching it. I must thank my camera crew, my 3 children, who are the camera crew here. Sonali, Sonia, and Sanveer. And my lovely wife, who's behind the scenes. She's the director. She's giving me directions right now. I guess she's used to it after so many years of marriage. But anyway. Okay, that mix of the green chilies, the cinnamon, the star anise and the onion is quite heady actually. I understand the people's obsession with Indian spices in the old days. Quite understand it now. Okay, so now we're ready to put our masala in. Now, roughly speaking, what I do, I mean, you can if you want to, but if you want to, you can use slightly less for taste. The masala that I showed you just now, the one that I bought commercially, I would normally take 1 spoon per kilogram of meat. And that is how I cook it. So I've got about 2 kilograms of meat there. So I've got about 2 spoons of masala in here. Okay? That's a rough measurement. You don't have to do that. If you're cooking 4 kilos of meat, you definitely won't put 4 spoons of masala in there. Because I promise you nobody's going to be able to eat it. It will be just too hot. So we stir in the masala. And this you've got to be quick with. For the very simple reason you don't want the masala to burn. Once it burns, it gives off a very pungent smell. But more than the pungent smell, it gives the curry a very dark color, which is not ideal. And now take my ginger and garlic. In you go. as my favorite guy would say, all in the poo. And then as quick as you can, your meat, which you've washed well. You must wash the meat well, otherwise you get a bloody taste in the curry, which is not really nice. I'm being very deliberate with the meat because I want to get rid of the part that drained out, the water that drained out, because it also tends to be a little bloody. Okay. Just need to dry my hand. Okay. Then it's the salt. I can't tell you to put 1 teaspoon, 2 teaspoons or whatever of salt, because I can't cook like that. I tend to look at it and measure as I go along. So please forgive me, I can't tell you exactly what to do, but you put the salt in. The critical thing about the salt, I put in a little extra because I'm going to put potatoes in this curry. Once you put the salt in, give it a good stir to coat all the meat with the masala. That's important. Turn the heat down slightly. You want all the meat coated, so as it cooks in its own juices. Remember, salt is able to draw water out, so you don't add any water, you allow it to cook in its own juices. So if you had to look at it, that's what it would look like. Well coated pieces of meat with the entire mixture. This is the braising part of this dish. Okay. We are now going to let this simmer for a while. We're going to do a time check and see how long it takes. But this is lamb, so it shouldn't be too long. So this is what the braised meat looks like. We're going to, like I said, we're going to allow it to cook for a while. It's got the salt, the masala. You want the meat to cook really well, because one of the tricks with a good curry is you want the meat to fry. Very often when you taste a curry, you will taste the meat is almost boiled. And especially if you go to these Indian restaurants that cook on demand, they would have meat that is par-cooked or pre-cooked, and they would start cooking with that, and it tends to taste a little bit boiled. So as you can see, this we're going to allow it to fry. This is what the curry looks like now after about half an hour of being on the stove at the very, I'd say a medium heat. Look at this gravy. It's starting to take real good shape, right? And you'll see I'll wait a little while longer because I like to fry it. Now you'll notice this is frying in its own juices. I have not added any water to this curry at all. I will let this meat fry a little longer. When the oil starts rising to the top, then I know it's frying properly. Or as we would say, if it's catching at the bottom, when it starts sticking to the pot surface, you'll see like there, when it starts sticking, then I will try to I'd add the tomatoes to it. Okay, just while we're on this, I want to let you have a look at the rice quickly. The rice is there. Now, the important thing about the rice, it's going to boil, right? But I've added a bit of turmeric. You can add a bit of cloves, a bit of cinnamon to add a little bit of flavor to the rice. And we will serve this curry with that rice. Okay, I think we're now ready to add the tomatoes to this curry. I want you to have a look carefully. You'll see the oil bubbling on the surface. Wherever you see it, you can see the oil bubbling on the surface. Okay? Which means the curry is now, the meat is fried. It is fried, I confirmed it, because I gave my wife a piece to taste. So it's cooked. We are now going to add tomatoes into this. As you can see, it's a fair amount of tomatoes into the pot. What the tomatoes do, it gives it a little bit of an astringent flavor. It acts as an astringent. But also very importantly, it allows for a nice gravy. You get a nice thick gravy rather than a watery gravy. So you stir it in. Stir it in well. Now we wait for the tomatoes to melt. They will melt. When the tomatoes are melted, then we're ready to add the potatoes into the curry. The trick is to allow it to cook till it fries, and then to add your tomato to prevent that boiled taste. So rather than a boiled taste, you're now going to get a fulsome flavor to the meat. We're almost there now. As you can see, the tomatoes have all but disappeared. There's just a few bits and pieces left. The trick now, we're going to boil water, because when I put my potatoes in and I coat them, I add boiling water to the curry, not cold water, because cold water draws all the heat out of the meat and with it all the flavor. In this way, your meat stays flavorful with the curry flavor. Okay, so as you can see, the curry is almost there. Now we're going to add the potatoes in. For best cooking results with the curry, where you want the potatoes to soak the gravy and be melting in your mouth, what you really want is to use something known as up-to-date potatoes. That cultivar of the potato is known as up-to-date. And it's a thing, I promise you. You can go and look at the Indian greengrocers or some of the supermarkets, and they would have it normally in stock. So we give it a good stir now, get the potato into the curry well and truly embedded, so it's going to start absorbing the flavor. There we go. And now to get the lovely gravy, what I need to do is get my kettle. I add boiling water, and I don't just pour it over the meat, try to spread it out a bit. About 700 ml, 600 ml of water should be good enough, as long as you coat everything. And now we wait for the lockdown to be over and the curry would be done. Turn the heat up a bit and good to go. After a few hours of good work, this is the food, the rice with the mutton curry. You will notice just now as a video, these are laid out for my children. You'll find the girls have bones in their curry because they enjoy the marrow in the bones, while Sanveer doesn't like bones, so he simply has meat. I guess you could say he's a meat and potatoes kind of guy. Now my harshest critics, to see if they are able to enjoy this food. They tend to tell me the truth when the food tastes good or the food tastes bad. That's Sanveer with the striking hairstyle. As you can see, that's my son.
I'm probably tired. Yeah, let's see.
Very tired, very hungry. He says he's going to eat anyway and say it tastes nice even if it doesn't, because he's hungry. That is Sonia. Sonia is the younger one of the twins, so she's the baby in the house. And in matric this year, so going through a great deal of stress and strain, but also going to taste my food. She's waiting to see what the reaction is from her brother first. And then Sonali. Sonali is the older of the twins, so we tell her she's the elder one. So she's not the baby. Yeah, she's not the baby. And she's also going to start eating her food now. My wife, unfortunately, says the appearance fee was not big enough, so she's not going to make an appearance, which we understand. It happens that budget constraints and COVID-19 lockdown, we don't have enough funds. So anyway, go ahead, kids, tuck in. And give me your opinion, nah? Honest opinion. So far, so good. You ate the rice.
You have to remind me sometimes I need to talk, because otherwise I will just finish the food.
How's the food tasting, son?
That's quite good. It's quite good.
Hmm?
The mutton is nice. It's easy to break apart and stuff like that. Obviously, I just take mainly meat pieces. And obviously the rice goes really well with it. Proper curry, basically. rice and the the rice and the curry. Yeah, I love it though. Thank you very much for the food, Dad.
You're welcome, you're welcome. I'm normally a good cook. Please say that for the camera.
What, you're normally a good cook?
Yeah, just say so that I'm a good cook.
Oh, yes. This is a standard we've become accustomed to.
Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so we're very used to this. So, yeah. It's really good. Yeah, better than most curries that you get outside, so that's just the truth.
Thank you, thank you. And you'll notice we eat with our hands because that's the cultural way. We don't use cutlery. We would eat with our hands because apparently the food tastes nicer. So we would. There's more flavor in the food. Sonia got nothing to say while she's breaking her meat there.
Oh no, it's nice. I tasted it already.
Okay.
It's good. The potatoes are soft.
Potato soft, I'm glad.
It's tasting really good, Daddy. Everything is like tender and the flavor's like really good.
Okay, so it's my usual high standard.
Yes, it's usually like this.
Oh, okay, no, that's fine. That's fine.
No, we are not being held ransom to say these
No,
things.
we mean it. It does, it's good. It's good.
So, there you have it, people. That is mutton curry a la Jaydev. I try my best. I love my cooking. And
I
yeah,
love my eating.
Sanvi loves his eating. And yeah, and now hopefully we'll see each other post COVID-19 when we can share some good food and laughter with each other in person. Thank you very much.